Hello and welcome back to the How to Get an Analytics Job podcast. So we've got a heavy hitter of a guest. We got Karolina here, who is, you just had a massive just success story. I'm looking at head of data science, COO, data scientist. Do you just want to kind of like start off by like walking us through your work history?
Yeah, sure. So, hi everyone. It's so nice to be here. So I've started 10 years ago and I've studied computing physics and modeling actually. So I was
Very cool.
quite familiar with the concept of what is the model, and especially when talking in perspective of physics, then there are learned that things should work. Formula is not enough.
Yeah.
I went out for my first job and I had no clue where to start. And in the country that I am living, we just had no international companies, maybe 5 bigger companies, and they were so new in our country. And analytics, we had that role. Analytics, it was not popular, and I was ashamed because I knew only Python programming language. Okay, Python was my main programming language. Then I knew a bit of C Sharp, .NET, SQL, and no one cared about that because I didn't know
Interesting.
Excel. So that was very a strange start for me, and I got my first job probably in a month of looking for that, and that was called database administrator, I guess, but it was actually analytics. It was American company, Western Union, and I basically what I did, I was working in regulatory reporting, so I was creating a lot of reports for financial regulators. And what I actually did there, I automated all the stuff because I was too lazy to work.
I don't think that's lazy. I think that's working smarter, not harder, right?
Yeah, but the work was just to find, some duplicates, and people were looking, into them by eyes, and I was just, there should be a way, and I knew like no Excel. I couldn't understand what the I don't know the column means in there. I could understand the concept, but Excel, I knew nothing, and I learned maybe in a couple of months. And I remember that after a year of working there, I was doing some Excel trainings already in the company.
Interesting. That's so funny because I started in Excel and have I've touched a little bit of SQL coding because like the Tableau development, like I'll have to like do an if then, and I guess that's technically just reappropriating some SQL code. But so you started with Python and coding and then backed into Excel, that's so funny. That seems like, but I guess it makes sense because Excel is such a popular analytics tool. It's the number one analytics tool out there right now.
Yeah, and it was 10 years ago, and no one cared about Python, and there were maybe in US and Western world companies utilizing Python already. Back then I read about econ physics, which was the closest thing to data science. Because
Wow.
remember, the data science started like around 10 years like out in the market. So I had this crazy moment where I was ashamed that I knew only Python, and then 5 years ago I was the star because I knew Python.
So yeah, so we got one of our listeners here saying it seems like starting from the top to bottom, I guess. So you're
Oh yeah.
overachiever and then backing up because yeah, you overthought Excel because I don't know. I feel like I'm intimidated by coding because it's like learning a whole language, with syntax and like how to structure everything. To where luckily I have people that I can outsource. Like through my consulting practice, I've outsourced, quite a bit of my consulting, like I guess the linear regression or, those kind of like what maybe web scraping to someone like you. Okay, so you
Oh
go
yeah.
ahead. What?
No, it's just when I was studying, it was crazy because it was physics plus programming, and we had a lot of exams, like 7, 8 exams per semester. And back then I thought that it's crazy because each semester we were learning new programming language, and I was complaining and saying that, we are not getting deep enough into that. And only after I graduated and started working, I realized that it was so great, because what I learned, not programming languages actually, but I learned to quickly adapt to the new environment. So whenever I started working as a data scientist, and so fast, and I was so comfortable by tools changing, programming languages changing. So that was a great skill for me to learn at university.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really, I see that all the time with students who are studying. I think what it is, they just want to expose students to a wide variety of different skill sets, to where I think the real learning happens once you get your first job. Because then there's stakes to where you can kind of retake the class, or maybe you could reach out to an understanding professor and they'll extend a deadline or help you get extra credit. That doesn't really fly though, like when you're getting paid to do a job.
Exactly. And I had another experience, because I finished my bachelor's. It's a bit different, I guess, in Lithuania, but I studied for 4 years. And then I knew I wanted to do something like data science, even though I didn't know that term or role.
Mhm.
And when we had the first master studies of data science, I started working there, studying there. And at the same time, I was actually working as a data scientist. And I think around that time, I was already a senior data scientist. So that was such a different experience for me as a student. Because I remember we were talking with professors, and they were extremely nice, but they had no clue how it works out in the world.
Right.
But they were curious, so I appreciated that. So that was a very nice time for us.
Okay. So how about this? Let's walk through the rest of your work history, and then I've actually got one of my students here on the back, kind of in the studio space. So you went from database administrator to data science, and then heading um, multiple organizations. So let's have you walk through that story, and then I'll pull the student on, and we can start having some Q&A.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I quickly realized what I wanted to be. So first of all, it was analyst. So after a year on automating everything I touched, basically, and learned Excel, I switched position. I started working in a Danish bank as an analyst. But again, I started working on data-driven products, and I already developed products. And I knew that I was coming to this podcast, and I was reflecting a bit on that time. And I think that it might be already a tip. I always said to my managers what I want to do, and I was very specific. I was not rude, and I was not I will do only this. But then I was always asking for opportunities, and I was always coming up with the ideas that, hey, I can develop the front end for my data driven tool, because I really wanted for users to use something. So I was going an extra mile, and so yeah, so I was a data scientist, and just because I wanted to get back to Python. So that was my initial thought of that. And I think in 2014, 15, I've heard of data science as a role, and I introduced this to my company, and I asked my managers if I have spare time, maybe I can work on some project using Python. And so that was spare time projects, and it was like a big bang. Everyone wanted to do data science, and I don't know what happened, but it was like 1 month, I think, where the whole bank, they were started screaming about data science, and that we a big data back then was the buzzword. So I was working in big data, so-called big data team, and then I started studying, and then I realized that I want to work with data science strategies, and the strategies is something that was very exciting for me back then, and I think up to now. And then I got an opportunity to move to work and live in Copenhagen and work on data science strategy for business banking. I did that, and then I got back to Lithuania because I met my husband, and then I took my first manager job. So that was official management job. I was head of behavioral modeling. So I was waiting so long, and I was not taking opportunities to be a manager because I wanted to be ready, actually. And management is something that is very important for me, and I'm very careful about that. And since then, I'm working on data science strategies, mentorship. I love working with people, and it's actually funny because I've counted that probably it's been 13 people that I helped to find job after they graduated. After they finished PhDs or postdocs or something like that.
Oh, wow.
So yeah,
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay,
That became my specialty. Yeah.
Okay, so you moved into a management role, and then did you work that for a number of years? Because then, like, I'm seeing like head of data at multiple positions here.
Yeah.
Head of data at SME Finance, and then head of data at Surfshark, which is funny. I was seeing Surfshark VPN ads all the time on my YouTube.
It means ads are working well.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. About the roles and what I believe in, that sometimes being head or C-level doesn't mean that it's somehow better than other roles. So I naturally joined smaller companies, and that's how I got, head of data. And also I've been preparing for that because being head of data, for me, it meant that I have to know not only data science, analytics part, but also data engineering, ML ops, and go into very technical details. So not only, soft part, but also the hard part. And I was doing that. I was preparing for that.
That's so cool. Awesome. Well, okay. So I'm neglecting the chat here a little bit. So Hunter Brown, one of my students here. Hey, everyone. Welcome, Hunter. I'm glad you could join the live stream. And then this is an interesting comment. So Kinga is actually coming on board with Silvertone, to where we're starting to spin up and prototype our first apprenticeship / kind of independent work study in the data science space. So we just talked to 5 head of nonprofits over the last 2 weeks, and we're starting to pilot this new program where, Kinga said in her comment, "Hey, everyone, I agree. Professors don't know what work is like in industry." So that's exactly what we're trying to solve with this new program that we're putting out there, to where Kinga will kind of mentor the students as they work with the head of these nonprofits to start, understanding their data more. And I think that's such an interesting idea because, yeah, the way that it's taught in the classroom typically is, they throw a bunch of, like, I think your experience is typical. It's not the exception. They throw a bunch of theory and a bunch of different tools, and you just kind of have to like almost just like cram it in, but you don't actually get like a deep use case.
But it's so nice. It's such a great idea, because I remember I was once asked to help to prepare training program for data scientists. And this was actually my idea as well, to just go to nonprofits and ask for data and ask, how can we help? And no one agreed because of the privacy, and they didn't want to share the data. And then we explained that there will be NDAs, of course, and we can help you to anonymize data and do whatever it takes. And they were hesitating to do that. So it's so great for me to hear that you are moving forward.
That is so funny you mentioned that, because literally the call that I had with Kinga yesterday, we were talking to, I think, the lead data scientist at a sex trafficking nonprofit organization. And what they had already instituted was a way to anonymize their database of people that they've helped. So like she can send us that anonymized data source, and we don't have to send, write up an NDA, because we're studying, the problem of sex trafficking as a whole, as opposed to, putting out any type of identifying information out there. So I think it's a really interesting use case.
Yeah.
But all right, so I'm going to pull on my student here. So this is Funke. So she just enrolled in our analytics career services program. And Funke, I think you're interested in going like fully into data science. Is that correct?
That's where I want to go. More of the technical side than just the business side. So I heard you say something about Python and the technical qualifications that you've kind of developed over the years. So that was kind of cool. I was going to ask you about that. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear.
Okay. I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Just wanted to make sure. So I'm in my work setting, so I just wanted to make sure you guys can hear me. So is it okay to go ahead and ask some questions?
Yeah, go ahead.
Cool. This is like my first time on a podcast, so I'm just trying to make sure that I'm together.
Also, a longtime podcast listener too. This must be kind of a surreal moment.
Yeah. I'm gonna put it in my time capsule. All right. So I saw that you. So I kind of got together a little bit of a list of some questions that I wanted to ask you. So just bear with me. What are some of the common mistakes and pitfalls that people new to analytics often make, and how can they be avoided?
Very good question. And actually, this morning I was thinking, because I have a very short presentation, let's say, in Lithuanian. It's in my native language about that thing. And I was thinking whether I should translate it to English. So thanks for the question. I will. So I'll try to remember. But so the first one I remember, don't do if no one is asking. So what I wanted to tell with that if someone is, well, sometimes people in data science, AI, machine learning, whatever buzzword we're using here, they want just to be nice and create something, extremely useful, but they think that it's going to be useful. And everything that we do in analytics, in data science, we should do for someone. So it should be business, organizations, governments. It should be a question to be answered or the problem to be solved. So that's the first thing. Another is, and I had another lecture about 3 types of overcomplication. So I think that overcomplicating things by picking too complex algorithms and tools that are too difficult to use, or it's hard to implement, and later on the solutions. So these are the main pitfalls for analysts and data scientists. So I would say try with the smallest, simplest possible version. Talk to business or stakeholders as often as possible. Don't be ashamed to show what you have, even though you feel that it's not, the finish, it's not the complete work, but just don't be ashamed, because there are 2 sides of that. When business or your stakeholders, when they see the progress, they more likely to use the end product. And the other thing, analysts and data scientists, they're getting feedback. And based on that feedback, they can improve faster, because there is this standard situation when data scientists or analysts, when they are getting, a task or the problem, they're getting back to their comfort zone computer, and they're programming and they're aiming for the perfect solution. And when they are getting back to their stakeholders, it's already too late. And stakeholders say, oh, I already forgot that I told you that. It's not the problem anymore. Or, environment changed so much that, the model that you build, you have to recalibrate it or completely changed. So that would be the second one. And actually, I want to mention the third one. So it's bias. The fact that as human beings, we are so biased about everything that we do. And it's fine, and it's just a part of us, but we have to think when working with data how to manage those biases. So for example, when we are looking at the data, when we are making decisions, how we are going to structure the data, how we are going to extract the data, what kind of features are we going to use, when we are, let's say, building a model, and then we are looking into model's accuracy, then whether the model is good, it's not the same as model's model's accuracy, the goodness of the model. So I would say those three would be the main.
Okay, thank you for that feedback. It was very detailed. I took notes on everything you just said. Thank you for that. So moving forward, I have another question. How do you approach data analysts, and what tools and methods do you typically use?
And my answer would start with, it depends on the problem. And I'm always saying that if it's just one-off analysis and you have to just look into something, just don't overcomplicate. Use Excel, use Google Analytics tools, or whatever tools are the closest to you. And that would be more than enough. If it's something that it will repeat itself, so basically the analysis, the model, then I suggest to use programming language or more advanced tools, because the goal is not to touch your work after you've done it, for as long as it makes sense. So I'm talking about the automating basically things. And if it's something that it should go into production, into something that is related to your company's interface, something that is facing your customers, then you should collaborate with the data engineers, ML ops, ML engineers, whatever roles you have, developers, maybe, I don't know, they're called differently in different companies, but then you have to look for some sort of collaboration before starting the project.
Okay.
Right, so you're talking about systems thinking.
Yeah.
Versus,
exactly.
yeah, and that's something that I teach my students is, if you're going to design some infrastructure if you can, so that instead of having your manager reach out to you and say, hey, I need to see this, like if you could have them log into their own dashboard and find their own insight, that's perfect. But unfortunately, there are going to be times where you're going to have to do some ad hoc analysis, and that's just going to happen, and it might just be a one-off analysis. So you can't really systematize that, but I think understanding the difference between what are the repeating questions that are going to come up over and over again, because then that cuts down on, well, what if you missed the email and then they go into that meeting, they don't have the data they need, they're going to come back and they're going to roast you. So if you can, and that's actually what I did in my first internship, is I developed the Tableau infrastructure for a 9-figure business, and we've just slowly started to add things on to it over the last, I guess it's going on 7 years at this point, which is really interesting.
I have one last question. So when you're dealing with stakeholders, what do you find is the best course of speaking with them, communicating them, and keeping the conversation active, like getting what you need out of them, things of that nature?
And that's a million worth question. I try to structure, and I try to teach my employees to structure their work, even though communication and in general data science is about uncertainties. But having structure helps a lot. So at the very beginning of any project, if it's not like ad hoc analysis, I like to have this design sprint together with stakeholders. And it's a very nice book by Google Ventures. It's called Design Sprint. So this helped me a lot, and this book shifted my mind. So spend some time together just talking about the problem. And actually, there were, I don't know, 2-3 years when I was very strict with my stakeholders. And I said that if you don't have time to talk about the problem, we don't have time to work on your problem. So I felt that I have to be radical because this was just beginning of data science, where stakeholders thought that it's a magic, and we are getting back to our room and doing some magic, and then bringing back, and it's then the rabbits outside, the hat, and here you are, this is your model. So I had to teach that it's not a miracle, that everyone should understand at least the basics of it. So getting back to the structure, so the first part is design sprint. The second part is, I called it good enough criteria set. So basically, where we are sitting down with stakeholders and we are discussing how the model or data-driven product should look like in order for it to be deployed, released into production, basically, for anyone to use. Because there is a sweet spot in between just having another product that no one is going to use, and this is the very frequent case with the dashboards, and between an ideal model that it would take 3 years to develop. So business needs to have products as soon as possible, and data analysts, they need time in order to improve their products. So having this good enough agreement, and usually those are simply as rules, the models accuracy should be this and that, let's say. It should cover at least 70% of all the customers, and all the simplest things that matters to business, we are writing them down. And when we are reviewing the first version of the model, which is again the simplest possible version, then we are getting back to this good enough criteria set, and we are reviewing and saying, hey, okay, this is good. And the trick here is that usually the first version that analyst fails, that it's very bad, it can be improved a lot. It's so good for business already.
Wow, that's good feedback. Okay. That was I don't have any more questions. Would you like me to add a few more questions, or?
Here, let me pull in. So Kinga actually added another comment on the chat here.
Okay.
She said, I love your advice about showing your work to your manager so that you can get feedback. So I think that this is something, well, so I didn't want to interrupt you when you were talking about this earlier, but I think that a lot of people in the analytics and the data science space think that what is impressive or is going to impress managers or people who are important in organizations is complexity. So that's what they do, is they'll spend 50 hours getting as complex as possible on something, and then they'll show it and it's off. And then the managers are actually mad because you should have checked in to see if you're heading in the right direction. It's like all of these, crazy algorithms you wrote or all of these bells and whistles don't really impress me because you're not moving the business forward in any way. Is that kind of what you see in the space?
Yeah, exactly. And it sounds so crazy, but so often analysts, they solve the problem, but it's not the problem they've been given to solve.
Right.
And again, this is also about overcomplications. And but at the same time, it's not that easy to identify the problem. And I really like to explain to business people that imagine that data scientists are doctors, and you are coming to them when you have the problem. If you don't have the problem, don't go to them. And you have to explain your symptoms. And for data scientists at the same time, I'm saying, please remember that those symptoms can be primary or the secondary symptoms. So sometimes it takes so long to understand the problem. And as in my last position as a head of data in Surfshark, I was heading data engineering, data analyst teams, and data science team. And as the data scientist, I had them as my direct reports. So that meant that I was going together with them to talk to business stakeholders to understand the problems. And yeah, oh boy, it was hard work to understand what kind of problems they actually had in their mind. So it's not
Right.
about stakeholders, it's about the situation and the business as it is.
Awesome. So we got another question coming from Hunter. So with language processing models such as the obvious one is ChatGPT, how do you think the role of analysts will change, considering that these models can code program for you? Which is funny because we literally just started to talk about this before we hit live stream. So you've got some thoughts.
Yeah, I actually, when I was head of data at Surfshark, I had the training sessions with all of my employees, and I called them data science incubator. And back then, actually, ChatGPT was released, and I told them you should use ChatGPT in order to write the code. And a lot of people got back to me and said, I feel uncomfortable because I feel that I would be cheating. And then I told that no, your job is to solve the problem. Your job is not to write the code. And I know there might be people who would disagree with me, but in my opinion, analytics, it's about solving the problems, getting answers, inspiring with data, and not just writing the code. It's one of elements that was very important. And with the time, it's not that important anymore because more and more people are getting more familiar with coding. Let's say when I was younger, we had nothing, I guess, at school with coding, and now people are starting coding, at very early stages in their lives, and that's great. So how it will change the role of analysts? I would say it's not only because of ChatGPT, but the fact that data engineering, ML engineering, ML ops are coming into the place, and those pieces were so missing in the data field. There will be less analysts in general because the data will be more structured, will be easier to access. But that's actually great news because those jobs who were kind of boring and repetitive, they will disappear. And there will be more emphasis onto, getting the problem right and solving the problem faster. Maybe there will be challenges coming into that direction.
Interesting. So would you say that, moving into the future, it's less about your technical acumen and more about how you understand the intersection of a specific either strategy or business use case or domain of business and how the data interplays with that to then make the right decision?
In analytics field, I would say yes. And of course, there will be need to understand technical parts. But even now, when, for example, I remember, I need to tell the story, but when I started working as data scientist, we built a lot of models, or we thought we built a lot of models. And of course, we started with, NLP, we started with the possible complex models in the world that no one needed. That's how my wisdom appeared now, because I did crazy things back then. And then we realized that there is no way to use those models because there were no infrastructure for models. So that was 2015, something like that. And then I was trying to understand why. Then I, of course, found that data engineering was the right role for that, and then data ops, and now ML ops, ML engineering. So basically, as data industry or data field is maturing, we have more and more roles into that. So saying like 5 years from okay, it's actually even 7 years from that time when I when I tell the story. So basically, even now we have analysts needing less and less technical stuff, because ML ops, ML engineers, data engineers, analytics engineers, that's another role, who are just taking out that technicality from analysts.
It's actually kind of soothing to hear you say that, because I've gotten further and further away from the technical side of things. And it's causing a little bit of anxiety for me of, if I wanted to go and get, a full-time analytics job, would I even have the current skill set? Because it's, have you ever heard of the Red Queen theory?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like you're running as fast as you can just to keep up with what's going on, to where back, I think 3 or 4 years ago, I was creating content and courses on Power BI. But the downside of that is that Power BI updates every single month. So I would create a course, and then in 15 days, it would immediately be outdated. So that's actually really comforting that, you can not necessarily worry about being up to snuff on the technical stuff, right away. And this is actually something that Katie, one of our career coaches, talked about in our Tuesday lecture of, it's less about knowing the exact right answer. Like if you're interviewing and they ask you a technical question, knowing the exact right up-to-date answer versus being able to show that you know how to go and find that information.
Exactly. And, when our grandparents were studying, their goal was to find the information, because it was hard to find the information. And now the whole information is just one click away. And now our goal is to find the relevant information, which is crazy
Right.
how fast it developed.
That's interesting. All right. So Hunter has asked a follow-up question. So Hunter is saying, I guess to follow up that question, how do you future-proof your career in data? Is it pretty much being able to tell the difference between what the data says and what people actually end up doing?
Mm-hmm. I always encourage people to find who they are in data field, because it's huge. There is a place for everyone, definitely in there. But probably someone expects more pragmatic tip from me. So I would say understanding the fundamentals of analytics, and just trying to keep up with what is changing, and just be aware. And actually, I really relate to what you said about technical depth. I'm also scared about that because I
Yeah.
haven't programmed in 4 years, probably. And I was just like, I don't know who I am anymore. But knowing fundamentals and knowing what is happening in data world, that definitely helps. And actually, as you mentioned, for example, Power BI, I like to say that those are tools. So imagine if you are building a house, you are using some tools, and you know them as tools to get to your goal to build a house. But sometimes when we are doing analytics, we see tools as the goal itself. So, for example, when I'm hiring, I'm not the fan of candidates who say that I learned that tool. I know it's not their fault. It's just how it's trending at the moment. But I love to hear when people say, I was trying to solve the problem with whatever tool I knew at that moment.
Interesting. It kind of gets back to the when we were talking about overcomplicating things. You're focusing on the tool. You're letting the tool be the main focus as opposed to the actual problem. And also to piggyback on what you said about, or my take on how to future-proof your career, is to make sure that you are continuing to build and maintain your relationships. because a few years back, I actually had a partner who was a fractional C-suite executive. And one thing that he told me is that he has a lot of people he's been connected to who've worked in one company. They've worked their way up to VP or, some C-suite executive role, but all they know are people in that company, and then they get let go, and then they just free fall because there's no social net to fall back on. So where I think going to networking events, I mean, just participating in the podcast and networking with, people here and starting to make, because it's interesting seeing that people will connect because they'll, like they might reach out to Hunter because, hey, I saw you ask a question on the podcast. So you can start building connections that way. But then also too, maintaining those relationships. So make sure that you stay in contact, and it's not just we did one thing and then I don't talk to you for 5 years. Because then if all of a sudden I reach back out to you after, 5 years of radio static, you're much less likely to help someone, right?
Yeah, networking is an amazing thing, and not only networking. I think you can actively network, meaning you are going to meetups and conferences, but also how I learned and how I improved a lot when I started my career. I was just reading blog posts. I was reading towards data science, Medium, because I had some problems, I had some issues, and I was looking for some answers, or maybe the fact that I'm not alone having this problem. So I would say that's another kind of networking. Or now we have LinkedIn, where we can follow people, where we can ask a lot of questions, where we can engage into conversations in the comment section.
Okay, so I'm looking at your LinkedIn profile over here on my second screen.
Yeah.
And this is an interesting point that I guess I'm mostly working with people trying to break into the space, or undergraduate students. But what you've done, like what I see in your tagline, is it literally says data leader. So I think also establishing authority in a space and being seen as an authority figure or a thought leader or just some type of leader, I think that brings a lot of opportunities. I'm kind of curious, are you getting outwardly recruited? Are you having recruiters reach out to you because you've got you've got over 3,000 followers, you've got, all of this content that you've posted, you've got a very impressive, track record. That's also probably going to bring opportunity into your world. But that's like, a 5, 10, maybe 15-year strategy.
I wouldn't say so, actually.
Interesting.
I think naturally I love to network. I love help people. And the first time, that was probably 7 years ago, I met a girl on the plane. She knew me and she asked me, could you be my mentor? And I was shocked. And actually,
Wow.
when you said that, I'm a data lead, I was hesitating to put that into the world, into LinkedIn, because as a lot of people, I do have imposter, and I also think that I'm not enough. I'm not sure if I know this. I'm not sure if I'm good enough at this role. So that's not easy. And I have to work with myself a lot. And that's why I was hesitating to become a leader at the first place. I wanted to be ready with myself, because leadership for me is about others and not me anymore. And this is a huge shift, when I don't think about my career. I think more about careers of others who are working with me. So it's a huge shift for me.
That is so interesting that you're the COO of an artificial and an AI company, and you still don't feel like you still feel timid and like, what do I know? That's so interesting. Because there's so many people who look up to you, obviously.
Yeah, and getting back to the point where you said that recruiters are inviting me, and that's true. I'm getting a lot of invites. I'm extremely bad at answering, extremely bad. But I think that I have to do this more often because I get so much inspiration out of those interviews, if they're good or if they're bad, actually. So quite recently, I had a very bad interview. And that's how I came with the term data pleaser. And then I wrote the post about
I saw that post. Yeah.
what is data pleaser. So this came out of the very bad interview that I had. So meaning the bad interview. So they were chasing me for months, and then I said, okay, let's have short call and it will be done. I'm not willing to change my job. Maybe I know someone. And then that company, they were looking for someone to do all the work, having no team, reporting directly to CEO. It's a huge company. And I was reflecting on that interview and how bad it is. And actually, I said that I'm not recommending your company to anyone because this is a toxic role, and I'm sorry, but and of course I explained that. So yeah, this is not only a positive thing to get invites from recruiters.
Right, but I'm just saying that I think the question that Hunter was asking about future proofing, the subtext of that question is some scarcity around, what would a career track look like? And actually, let's bring Funke back into the conversation. What Funke, what is your idea of like what career track might appeal to you? Like, or have you given much thought to that?
Actually, yes, I was looking at jobs early this morning when I was at work. Yeah, so I was going to touch base with you about it later, but it was a senior data analyst position for Geico, and I was just looking at it has a lot of technical requirements. Like I can pull it up real quick. I just found that because I'm really interested in learning more about coding, so the fact that it asks that you had to have SQL experience, R and Python experience, as well as just learning how to do large database queries like Snowflake, SAS. It was just kind of interesting to me. So looking at something like this is kind of the path that I'm looking towards, and they just call it like a senior product analyst. But I know that there's a lot of things like data analyst itself or a business analyst is just kind of like a very broad, like, umbrella of things that are under it. If that makes sense.
Yeah, well, I think kind of what I was trying to get at is, do you want to be there? There's kind of like almost like a fork. And Karolina, tell me if you disagree. So
Okay.
You can either go into the subject matter expertise realm where you are, that subject matter, or you can go kind of into I want to start managing either systems or people. Like, do you have any thought kind of on that?
Oh, okay. No, I'm not trying. I don't want to manage people.
Okay, so you want to get like really more into the technical stuff.
Yeah, I don't want to manage people anymore.
Okay, so
not saying that I'm not a people person. It's just kind of like you're dealing with. I would say it's a lot of emotional intelligence that's required for you when you're dealing with people and managing them. You have to figure out where they are on the emotional elevator for the day, or at that point, and then you just have to like kind of coach them in a manner that they understand and they can absorb, regardless of what's going on or what work you need delivered.
Gotcha.
Did that answer your question?
Yes. Okay. Well,
okay.
It's funny because this is like something that we're probably going to talk about later in the coaching call. Okay. But so Karolina, with that in context, do you have any advice to those who are trying to go down like a more technical track and become a subject matter expert?
Find a good manager.
Oh, okay. That's so interesting. I was expecting like more tactical advice, but no, that's. Do you go on? How do you spot a good versus a bad manager?
Okay, I will go to that. But first of all, why? It's because you need opportunities to develop while doing work. And that's quite rare, to be honest. That's why I always say look for a good manager. How to spot. And this is what I'm teaching or mentoring about. it's not only employers who are picking employees, it's also you picking a job. And these shouldn't be only words, but please believe in yourself, because you are picking the right place for you. So prepare questions. What is important to you? And if we are talking about technical data part, so always ask, you have team or department of data, let's say data. How many data engineers? How many data analysts? Do you have any data scientists? What kind of projects are already completed in your company? What this role is going to be about? And if someone is telling you that, oh, we are just looking around, and you will feel that fluffiness, uh, that's probably not going to be the very, very good place. Or to say in more, there is a chance that you won't enjoy this working place in the technical sense.
I have a quick question. You said that I should find a good manager and find work that also develops me while I'm doing that, correct? So is there an example in your career that you had to do something of that nature, or a project that you've worked on that was very difficult, but at the same time, gave you a little bit of experience in what you were trying to, a skill that you were trying to grow?
I was so lucky with my managers, but at the same time, I was picky with my managers.
Okay.
And I kind of had, of course, not at the very beginning, but maybe 3 years of having experience, I kind of knew what I wanted, and I was looking for that particular role. So, for example, I wanted to do data strategy, which sounded crazy for me. And I thought that this will be a goal of 3 years. It happened in half a year that I got an opportunity to do that. But also the setup and this goes for I guess the most technical roles, that the company, the maturity of the company in the tech, what kind of tech stack do they have? It matters a lot, actually. And if company is just trying to do first steps in analytics, and let's say they don't have data, but they are hiring data analysts, this will be a struggle. And what I also see when people ask me to mentor them, that they get stuck in those roles, because worst case that you become senior data analyst, senior data scientist, senior ML engineers, not having done any models, just because you stayed in the company, just because reorganizations or any political stuff. And then psychologically, it's extremely hard to get out in the market and say, hey, I'm senior data analyst, I haven't done analytics. So just try to avoid that. Try to be strategic about your career.
Okay, have more of a defined path. Okay.
Yeah, actually, one piece of advice that Katie had was it might be a good idea to get your first analytics job at a larger organization where they have a structure in place and you have real mentorship from someone who's already been there, done that. The data is more mature. There's systems in place. Like, they'll actually have an onboarding manual for you, maybe. So where it's funny, because Katie's almost like my foil, to where she's worked with billion-dollar companies, to where I've been in the startup space the whole time. And she works on the operations side. I work on the sales and marketing side. And that was a really interesting insight to me, because I'm so against the idea of working for a big corporation. I don't know, it just doesn't sit well with me. But that being said, though, if you want to get into like machine learning and predict, like, you need huge sets of data, right? To where in a startup, you're probably not going to be having that large of a data set. I mean, I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are.
Exactly the same. And I'm so lucky because of my experience. And let's say when I was working in the Danish bank, and maybe after 5 years already working in there, I started the team of behavioral modeling. So we were doing like research models that are very similar to what people do in academia. And this is amazing opportunity just to do models all the time, no ad hocs, like nothing like that.
Yeah.
So this was just a miracle job. And then I was reflecting on that, and what kind of company can offer such job? It's, I guess, only big corporations or startups that are developing AI-based research products. So 1%, less than 1% of all the like 0.0001% of the companies.
So I feel like, Carolina, you haven't talked much about so what is Swirl AI and what are you doing there?
Oh yeah. So actually, plot twist. So SwirlAI is the company established by my husband half a year ago. And I remember the exact time. And actually, I was about to reflect on when you said that you have to build your brand for long years on LinkedIn, for example. So my husband busted that myth. So he started, I don't know, maybe now it's 7 or 8 months ago. And I was with my brand, my network on LinkedIn and my reputation. And he was not active on LinkedIn. And he started putting posts. He actually was data scientist and analyst before, but then he started looking into more technical stuff. So data engineering, MLOps. And he started posting on LinkedIn. Now he has 45,000 followers.
He's getting insane engagement on these posts. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah. And he was doing so great. And anyone who is willing to learn again, more technical part of ML analytics, you can subscribe to SwirlAI newsletter. It's weekly newsletter full of schemes, graphs, and tips. And he was doing so great. And then I thought that maybe I should join him because my expertise lies in like business, data science part, and building models, and his expertise starts when models are being built already. So I think that was the great addition. And basically, SwirlAI is about high quality content about data, ML, data engineering. And also, it's about helping business to find right people, and sometimes help if they need to structure the data. So it's about helping people to upskill in data and companies to be better with data.
That is so cool. Interesting. I didn't realize it was a joint venture with you and your husband. That's so exciting. And you guys are getting some traction too.
Yeah, it's funny because starting with COVID, we started working from home, both of us, and sometimes startups asking us to consult them, and they write me first. And then my husband, after an hour, said, "Hey, look, this company texted to me." And then together we are texting back saying, "Hey, we are just actually happen to be husband and wife. And we are here to help you." So so everything came very naturally out of the goal to help people in data world. So yeah.
That's awesome. Cool. We're hitting right about the hour mark. So Carolina, thank you so much for your time. I feel like you just so many nuggets of wisdom right here.
Oh, thank you.
And sorry, Funke, you're muted for some reason. I don't know. I can't unmute you. I was going to say, thank you for being on. It looks like we're having some technical difficulties. And also, oh, I missed this chat. Michael Mattia, thank you for joining in. Speaking of that, everybody who asked questions in the chat, thank you so much. You guys helped enrich the conversation. All right, you guys have a good one. See ya.
Thank you. Take care.